Chapter 1. Ren had a problem. Several problems, actually, arranged in ascending order of catastrophe. Problem 1. He had been awake for 31 hours. Problem 2. The errand that was supposed to take 40 minutes, deliver documents to the East Office, wait for signature, return, had somehow expanded into a 6-hour odyssey involving a locked filing room, a missing key, a deputy who kept saying almost ready in the specific tone of a man who had no intention of ever being ready, and one very aggressive houseplant that Ren had walked into twice in the dark hallway. Problem 3. He had finally been redirected, go to the 42nd floor, they'll sign there, and had ridden the elevator up in a state that could generously be described as vertical sleep, and had walked through the first open door he found, and had sat down on the first available surface because his legs had simply decided they were done, and the surface was warm and solid and smelled extraordinary, like cedar and cold air and something darker underneath, and Ren had thought, distantly, "Oh, that's nice," and had closed his eyes for just 1 second. And had woken up to complete silence. Not peaceful silence. The specific silence of a room full of people who have all stopped breathing at the same time. Ren opened his eyes. He was in a boardroom. A very large boardroom, all dark glass and low lighting, a table that probably cost more than his apartment building, and approximately 15 men in extremely expensive suits all staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to barely contained violence. Ren's gaze traveled slowly downward. He was sitting on someone's lap. He was sitting on someone's lap at the head of the table. The lap belonged to a man who was very still in the way that dangerous things went still, not frozen, just waiting. Dark suit, dark eyes, jaw sharp enough to file documents on. One hand rested on the table. The other, Ren realized with creeping horror, had come to rest at some point on Ren's back. Not moving. Just resting there. Like it had decided to stay. Ren's mouth opened. "I can explain," he said. The man's eyes moved to him slowly. They were very dark. They were also, Ren noticed with the fractured clarity of someone whose brain had abandoned ship, extremely beautiful, which was not a useful thing to notice right now. "Can you?" the man said. It was not a question. His voice was low and terrifyingly even. "Yes," Ren said. "Well, partially." Silence. "The explainable part," Ren continued, because apparently he was doing this, "is that I've been awake for 31 hours and I was sent to this floor for a signature and I sat down for 1 second. He paused. "The less explainable part is that your lap is very comfortable and I think I fell asleep in under a minute, which has never happened to me before, and I'm choosing not to examine what that means right now." Something happened to the man's expression. It was very small. Almost nothing. But Ren, whose entire survival strategy had always been watching faces for signs of incoming disaster, caught it. Not anger. Something else. Across the table, a second man, same face, Ren's exhausted brain registered distantly, same face, had gone very still in a different way. Watchful. Cataloging. His eyes moved between Ren and the man whose lap Ren was occupying with the focus of someone solving an equation. A third man, same face again, Ren thought, what is happening, sat at the far end of the table. He was the only one smiling. It was a small smile. Ren's instincts, the ones that had kept him employed and alive in this organization for 3 years, told him the smile was the most alarming thing in the room. "You," the man beneath him said quietly, "are sitting on me." "Yes," Ren agreed. "I'm going to stand up now." "Are you?" "Immediately. Right now." Ren did not move. His legs had filed a formal complaint with the rest of his body and were refusing to cooperate. "My legs aren't working yet." A sound came from somewhere at the table. Ren couldn't identify it. It might have been a suppressed laugh. It might have been the precursor to his death. "Take your time," the man at the far end said pleasantly. He had a slight smile that didn't move. "We're not doing anything important. Just deciding who controls the northern ports." "Milo," the man beneath Ren said. "Dante," the smiling man, Milo, replied in the same tone, which somehow communicated an entire conversation. Ren's legs chose that moment to remember their purpose. He stood too fast, swayed, and grabbed the edge of the table with both hands. The documents he'd been carrying for 6 hours fluttered to the floor in a small catastrophic fan. 15 men watched him crouch down and collect them. He straightened, cleared his throat. "I need a signature," he said, because at this point he had nothing left to lose. "The deputy on 36 sent me up. It's for the Eastern Warehouse transfer. I've been waiting since." He checked his watch. 11 this morning. Silence. Then the man Milo had called Dante, the one whose lap Ren's brain would not stop reminding him, held out his hand. Ren placed the documents in it. He watched Dante read them. 30 seconds. Then he signed precisely at the bottom and held them back out without looking up. Ren took them. Thank you, Ren said, which felt wildly inadequate. He turned toward the door. Your name. Ren stopped. It was the quiet one who'd spoken. The second man, the one who'd been watching. He hadn't moved. He was still watching now with the same focused, unreadable expression. Ren said. Park Ren. Errand coordination, floor 23. The quiet man said nothing. Just looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he looked back at the table. Ren left. He made it into the elevator. He pressed the button for floor 23. He stared at his own reflection in the elevator doors and thought, very clearly, I sat on the lap of one of the CO triplets in the middle of a board meeting and then asked him for a signature. The doors opened on 23. Ren walked to his desk, sat down, put his head on his arms, and went directly back to sleep. Chapter 2. The meeting resumed. Dante was aware of this in the way he was aware of most things precisely, completely, and from a slight distance, as though he were watching it happen to someone else. He knew what was being said. He responded correctly. He made 3 decisions in the space of 20 minutes that would rearrange the flow of approximately 40 million, and he made them without hesitation because that was what was expected of him. Dante. The eldest. The voice of the 3. The leader, people said, in the way people said things they had decided were true and no longer bothered to question. He was not the leader. There was no leader. They were 3 parts of the same thing, had always been, and the decision to let the world believe otherwise had been a strategic one, made when they were 19 and understanding for the first time how useful it was to be misread. But somewhere between 19 and now, the strategy had become the cage. The meeting ended. People filed out. Kale remained, as he always did, sitting with the stillness that unsettled everyone except Dante and Milo, who had grown up next to it and found it as natural as breathing. Milo was still smiling. Don't, Dante said. I'm not doing anything. You're about to say something. I was simply going to observe, Milo said, that in 15 years of these meetings, no one has ever fallen asleep on you. He was exhausted. He told you your lap was comfortable. He was exhausted and tactless. Kale, without looking up from the window, he said it had never happened to him before. Pause. The falling asleep. He found it notable. Dante looked at his brother. Kale met his eyes briefly, then looked away. This was the thing about Kale that no one who didn't know him would ever understand. He noticed everything, filed everything, and the things he chose to say out loud were never accidental. He said it had never happened to him before. Dante looked at the chair at the head of the table. The one he always sat in because the eldest sat there, because Dante sat there, because the role required it. The boy Park Ren, floor 23, had sat down without knowing whose chair it was, without knowing whose lap it was. Had looked at Dante's face with those exhausted, horrified eyes and had said, with complete helpless honesty, your lap is very comfortable and I think I fell asleep in under a minute. Not I'm so sorry, sir. Not the instant, total shutdown of self that everyone else performed in this room. Just, I can explain. Well, partially. Dante picked up the signed documents from the table. Park Ren, floor 23, errand coordination. Had been in the organization 3 years. Twice demoted for, Dante pulled the detail from memory because he remembered everything about everyone who moved through this building, speaking out of turn. Still employed because his efficiency rating was inexplicably the highest on the floor. Speaks out of turn, Dante thought. He found himself wondering what else the boy would say given the chance. He set the documents down. Leave his employment record as it is, he said. Milo looked at him. Was someone going to change it? No. I'm saying leave it. A beat. Of course, Milo said, in the tone that meant he was delighted and intended to say nothing more about it. Dante stood, buttoned his jacket, walked to the window. Below, the city moved in its indifferent patterns. He had stood at this window for 7 years and watched it and felt mostly nothing. Not peace. Not satisfaction. Just the particular numbness of a man who had spent so long being what was needed that he could no longer locate what was wanted. He thought about 31 hours without sleep. He thought about a person who had sat down on the nearest available surface and simply stopped. Not out of arrogance. Not out of fear. Out of pure, unguarded need. Your lap is very comfortable. Something in Dante's chest, something that had been quiet for a very long time, turned over once. He did not examine it. He had a port negotiation to finalize. Chapter 3. The next morning Ren received a new assignment. Not a demotion. Not a termination notice. Not even a formal reprimand, which was the minimum he had been expecting after spending his commute composing his own apology letter in his head. Dear Mr. CO, all three of you presumably, I am writing to explain the incident on the 42nd floor. I would like to begin by acknowledging that your lap is comfortable was not an appropriate thing to say to your employer. His new assignment was, floor 42. Permanent. Effective immediately. Report to Kim Juno for orientation. Ren read it 3 times. Congratulations, said his deskmate Suji, reading over his shoulder. You got promoted. I fell asleep on someone. Apparently that's a skill. She looked impressed. I've been here 5 years. Kim Juno, it turned out, was a precise, faintly terrifying man in his 40s who ran the 42nd floor with the energy of someone who had personally survived multiple disasters and intended to prevent the next one through sheer organizational force. You'll shadow operations, he told Ren, walking him through the floor at a speed that suggested he had somewhere more important to be. Coordinate between the triplets' individual schedules. Manage document routing. Sit in on meetings as needed for same-day follow-up. He stopped. Looked at Ren. Do you have any questions? Is this a punishment? Ren asked. I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely can't tell. Kim Juno looked at him for a long moment. No, he said carefully. Did one of them request this? Another pause. Longer. Your efficiency rating flagged during routine review, Kim Juno said, in the tone of a man reciting something he had been told to say. Ren looked at him. Kim Juno looked back. Right, Ren said. The 42nd floor was different from 23 in the way a loaded gun was different from an empty one. Same basic shape. Entirely different weight. People moved quietly up here. Spoke in measured tones. Nobody left coffee cups on the wrong desk. Ren lasted 40 minutes before his mouth got him into trouble. He was observing a document handoff, routine, 5 people in a small conference room, when one of the attendants, mid-presentation, stated a figure that didn't match the number Ren had routed through the filing system at 11:40 the previous night. Ren knew he should say nothing. That number's wrong, he said. Everyone looked at him. The Q3 projection, Ren continued, his brain attempting to stop his mouth and failing completely. That's the draft figure from 2 weeks ago. The revised version was filed at 11:40 last night. It's different by about 18%. Silence. Who are you? One of the attendants asked. I started today, Ren said. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I'll get the revised document. He was already moving because motion was better than standing still while everyone stared at him. Give me 4 minutes. He got it in 3. The meeting was paused. The figures were corrected. Nobody thanked him. Nobody yelled at him either, which Ren was choosing to count as a win. He went back to his desk. At exactly 3 in the afternoon, a document landed on his desk. He picked it up. It was a standing authorization. His name. His employee number. Access to the central filing system, levels 1 through 7. Level 7 was restricted to senior operations. There was no note. No explanation. Just the authorization signed with a single initial. D. Ren looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up, toward the far end of the floor, toward the closed door of the office suite, behind which, he now understood, one of 3 identical faces was sitting. He thought, I don't know which one of you this is. He thought, I don't know why you're doing this. What came out of his mouth quietly to no one was, thank you, Dante. The office suite was soundproofed. There was no way anyone had heard. Ren was almost certain. From behind the closed door there was a long silence. Then, very quietly, what might have been the sound of a chair shifting. Chapter 3. The next morning Ren received a new assignment. Not a demotion. Not a termination notice. Not even a formal reprimand, which was the minimum he had been expecting after spending his commute composing his own apology letter in his head. Dear Mr. CO, all 3 of you presumably, I am writing to explain the incident on the 42nd floor. I would like to begin by acknowledging that your lap is comfortable was not an appropriate thing to say to your employer. His new assignment was, Floor 42. Permanent. Effective immediately. Report to Kim Juno for orientation. Ren read it 3 times. Congratulations, said his desk mate Suji, reading over his shoulder. You got promoted. I fell asleep on someone. Apparently that's a skill. She looked impressed. I've been here 5 years. Kim Juno, it turned out, was a precise, faintly terrifying man in his 40s who ran the 42nd floor with the energy of someone who had personally survived multiple disasters and intended to prevent the next one through sheer organizational force. You'll shadow operations, he told Ren, walking him through the floor at a speed that suggested he had somewhere more important to be. Coordinate between the triplets' individual schedules. Manage document routing. Sit in on meetings as needed for same-day follow-up. He stopped. Looked at Ren. Do you have any questions? Is this a punishment? Ren asked. I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely can't tell. Kim Juno looked at him for a long moment. No, he said carefully. Did one of them request this? Another pause. Longer. Your efficiency rating flagged during routine review, Kim Juno said, in the tone of a man reciting something he had been told to say. Ren looked at him. Kim Juno looked back. Right, Ren said. The 42nd floor was different from 23 in the way a loaded gun was different from an empty one. Same basic shape. Entirely different weight. People moved quietly up here. Spoke in measured tones. Nobody left coffee cups on the wrong desk. Ren lasted 40 minutes before his mouth got him into trouble. He was observing a document handoff, routine, 5 people in a small conference room, when one of the attendants, mid-presentation, stated a figure that didn't match the number Ren had routed through the filing system at 11:40 the previous night. Ren knew he should say nothing. That number's wrong, he said. Everyone looked at him. The Q3 projection, Ren continued, his brain attempting to stop his mouth and failing completely. That's the draft figure from 2 weeks ago. The revised version was filed at 11:40 last night. It's different by about 18%. Silence. Who are you? One of the attendants asked. I started today, Ren said. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I'll get the revised document. He was already moving because motion was better than standing still while everyone stared at him. Give me 4 minutes. He got it in 3. The meeting was paused. The figures were corrected. Nobody thanked him. Nobody yelled at him either, which Ren was choosing to count as a win. He went back to his desk. At exactly 3 in the afternoon, a document landed on his desk. He picked it up. It was a standing authorization. His name. His employee number. Access to the central filing system, levels 1 through 7. Level 7 was restricted to senior operations. There was no note. No explanation. Just the authorization signed with a single initial. D. Ren looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up, toward the far end of the floor, toward the closed door of the office suite, behind which, he now understood, one of 3 identical faces was sitting. He thought, I don't know which one of you this is. He thought, I don't know why you're doing this. What came out of his mouth quietly to no one was, thank you, Dante. The office suite was soundproofed. There was no way anyone had heard. Ren was almost certain. From behind the closed door there was a long silence. Then, very quietly, what might have been the sound of a chair shifting. Chapter 4. Kale watched. This was, in the opinion of most people who worked on the 42nd floor, all Kale did. He sat in meetings and watched. He stood in corridors and watched. He was present at every significant moment in the CO operation the way a security camera was present. Comprehensive, silent, and easy to forget about until you needed the footage. They were not wrong exactly. What they missed was the part where the watching was not passive. Kale noticed everything because the world had spent his entire life speaking around him. Addressing Dante, who answered. Addressing Milo, who smiled. Looking at Kale and then looking away because Kale's face in stillness was apparently difficult to hold, and so people simply didn't. He had learned very young that if you were invisible, you saw things clearly. Park Ren had been on the 42nd floor for 11 days. In 11 days, Kale had documented internally the following. Ren arrived 9 minutes early every day and spent those 9 minutes reading whatever document had landed on his desk overnight, so that when Kim Juno arrived he was already oriented. He didn't do this to be noticed. He did it because the alternative was being behind, and being behind made his jaw tighten in a specific way that suggested he found it physically uncomfortable. He corrected errors. Every time. Regardless of whose error it was or what rank they held. His face, in the moment before he spoke, went through the same sequence every time. I should not say this, I am going to say this, I am saying this, I have said this, why do I do this? He talked to himself under his breath when he thought he was alone. Not constantly. Just in moments of strong feeling. Brief, honest statements that he apparently needed to make aloud to process. That was a mistake. Okay. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to be professional about it. Thank you, Dante. That last one had made Kale go still. Not because it was bold, though it was. Not because Ren had looked at an unsigned initial and known without being told whose it was, though that too. Because of the way he'd said it. Not thank you, Mr. CO. Not the careful, depersonalized address everyone up here used, because addressing one of them by name felt presumptuous, felt like claiming a familiarity that hadn't been offered. Thank you, Dante. Like a person speaking to another person. Kale had been called the quiet one his entire life. The watchful one. Once, memorably, the one that makes you feel like you've done something wrong without knowing what it is. His brothers, who loved him, had also called him impossible to read even for us, and we share a face. He wasn't sure he'd ever heard someone say his name the way they meant it. He wasn't sure anyone knew which one was him. On the 12th day, Ren was alone in the small archive corridor. Kale had learned his schedule, cross-referencing a routing discrepancy with the physical files. It was tedious work. Ren had been at it for 40 minutes. Kale came to retrieve a document which he did not actually need, and stood reading it while Ren worked. Ren lasted 6 minutes before he noticed. Kale watched him notice. The small stiffening. The quick glance. The assessment, suit, build, face. CO. Which one? And then the particular quality of stillness that meant Ren had decided not to ask and was going to fail at that decision. You're Kale? Ren said. Kale looked up. Ren looked like he wanted to walk into a wall. Sorry? You didn't, I shouldn't have, I'm just saying it because you're not Dante. Dante has there's something different about his, a pause visibly painful. You hold your face differently. Do I? Kale said. I'm sorry. That was strange. You can tell us apart. Ren blinked. Then, yes. Since about day 3. Kale looked at him. Most people, even people who had worked with them for years, hesitated. Guessed wrong. Defaulted to Mr. CO to avoid the embarrassment of being incorrect. It was practical. Kale understood. How? He asked. Ren opened his mouth. Closed it. The sequence played out. I should not say this. You watch people like you're memorizing them, Ren said. Dante watches people like he's deciding something. Milo watches people like he already knows the ending. He paused. And you look at people like you're hoping they'll do something that surprises you and you're not sure they will. The archive corridor was very quiet. Kale said nothing for a long time. Ren had gone slightly pink. I'm going to go back to the discrepancy. The routing error is in column 12, Kale said. The date stamp is off by a day. It was logged on a Tuesday but the physical transfer occurred Monday. Ren turned to column 12. Yes, he said quietly. Then, thank you. Not thank you, Mr. CO. Thank you. Like a period at the end of a sentence that meant only itself. Kale retrieved his unnecessary document and left. He took the long way back to the office suite, which added 4 minutes to the walk, and spent those 4 minutes with the same thought turning over in his chest like something learning how to move. You look like you're hoping they'll do something that surprises you. In 31 years, he had never been described accurately by someone who had known him less than 2 weeks. He sat at his desk. He did not tell his brothers. He thought he might want to keep this one thing just briefly for himself. Chapter 5. 3 weeks in, Ren understood structurally that something was happening. He did not understand what. The evidence. He had been assigned to a standing position on the 42nd floor without a clear operational reason. His access level was, according to Suji, who he called on day 2 in a panic, completely insane. That senior operations level. Ren, what did you do? He had not been yelled at once, which in 3 years on floor 23 had never been true for any period longer than 4 days. And the triplets kept appearing. Not intrusively. Not in ways that could be pointed to and named. But Dante had stopped a meeting twice to verify a document Ren had flagged in front of the room, without acknowledging Ren directly. The documents had been wrong. Everyone in the room had watched Dante correct them and had understood, without being told, that whoever had caught the error was being implicitly credited. Kale had started appearing in corridors where Ren was working. He never initiated conversation. But 3 times now, without looking up, he had said something like the answer is in the 3rd column or Juno already handled that one, don't reroute it, quiet, precise and delivered with the timing of someone who had been paying attention. And Milo smiled at him. Not at the room. Not the general pleasant expression that Milo wore in meetings like a very beautiful mask. At him. The first time it had happened, day 6, Ren had walked into a room 15 seconds before realizing there was a meeting happening, had begun backing out immediately, and had looked up to find Milo watching him with an expression of pure unhurried entertainment. Ren had said out loud in front of 4 senior staff, "I walked into the wrong room again." And Milo had said, "The meeting's almost done. You can wait." Not a command. An invitation. Ren had stood by the door for 11 minutes while Milo, without once losing the thread of a negotiation, looked at him twice more with that same slight smile. Like Ren was the most interesting thing in the room. I was the most interesting thing in the room, Ren thought now, 3 weeks in, sitting at his desk trying to be rational about it. To one of the CO triplets. During a port negotiation. He put his head down on his desk. "This," he told the desk surface, "is a problem." The problem being, he was fairly certain, not definitely, not provably but fairly, that he was being courted. The larger problem being, he didn't know which one. The largest problem being, he wasn't sure it was only one. He lifted his head. Kim Juno was standing at the edge of his desk with the expression of a man who had seen many things in his career and was watching another one happen in real time. "The triplets would like you in the 42nd floor suite," Juno said carefully, "at 5 o'clock. Ren looked at him. "All 3 of them," Juno added. "Of course," Ren said. Juno lingered for a moment. Then, "Ren." "Yes. In 15 years on this floor, I've seen a great many people called into that suite." He paused. "You're the first one who walked in because they fell asleep. I was extremely tired." "Yes." He looked at Ren with something that might have been the world's most restrained sympathy. "I know." He left. Ren looked at the clock. 4:17. He had 43 minutes. He spent them drafting, in his head, every possible version of what he wanted to say, and every probable version of what his mouth would actually produce instead. He was, he thought, probably doomed. He was also, beneath the doomed, something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Chapter 6. 5 o'clock arrived the way bad weather arrived. You saw it coming and still weren't ready. Ren knocked on the suite door at 4:59 because being late felt worse than being early and being early felt better than standing in the hallway for 60 seconds thinking about his life choices. "Come in." Dante's voice. Ren had learned to identify them by voice too, in the same way he'd learned their faces. Not deliberately, just through the accumulation of being near them. Dante's voice had a particular quality of finality to it, like each sentence was also a door closing. Ren opened the door. The suite was not what he'd expected. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. Something colder maybe. More deliberately intimidating, the visual equivalent of the Reputation. But the room was warm in tone, dark wood and low light, 3 separate workspaces arranged without obvious hierarchy. Books on actual shelves. A window that took up the entire far wall, the city laid out below it like an argument for scale. 3 desks. 3 chairs. Nothing labeled. The triplets were arranged, not arranged, Ren corrected himself, they're just in the room, in a way that meant he was immediately in the center of all 3 sight lines when he entered. Dante stood by the window. Kale sat at the nearest desk, a document in his hand that he was not reading. Milo was on the couch. There was a couch, dark gray long, with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, looking entirely comfortable in the way of someone who had decided comfort was an information-gathering strategy. "Sit down," Dante said. Ren sat. There was a single chair positioned across from the couch, which meant Milo was directly in front of him and Dante and Kale were on either side. He was, he noted, seated in the geometric center of a triangle. He was definitely not reading into that. "You've been on this floor for 3 weeks, Dante said. He didn't move from the window. "Your performance review." "I corrected a senior analyst in front of his team on day 1, Ren said. His mouth. "I understand if that's what this is about." Dante paused. "It's not what this is about." Okay. Ren put his hands on his knees. Sorry? Continue. A beat that might, in different lighting, have been interpreted as fond. Your performance review is the highest on the floor, Dante said. Juno has recommended a permanent contract. The position would be formalized. Same responsibilities, expanded access, direct report to operations. Ren looked at him. Then at Kale, who was watching him the way he always watched, like he was waiting for the thing underneath the surface to emerge. Then at Milo, who was watching him with that particular attentive stillness. Is this because I fell asleep on you? Ren asked. The room went quiet. Not the dangerous kind of quiet, Ren realized a second later, a different kind. The kind that comes when something unexpected has been said and the room is deciding what to do with it. Milo made a sound. Was a laugh. Short, genuine, slightly startled, the laugh of someone who had not planned to laugh. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then he pressed his mouth together and composed himself with visible effort. But it had happened. Kale's eyes moved to Milo. Something passed between them that Ren didn't have the context to translate. Dante, still by the window, said, "No." "Okay," Ren said. Then, because he had clearly already broken the seal, "I believe you. I just needed to ask." "Why?" "Because the alternative explanation is that I'm actually good at this job and someone noticed and..." He stopped. Finished the sentence internally, "and I've been here 3 years and nobody noticed before, so that explanation requires me to believe something changed, and the only thing that changed is that I ended up on this floor, so..." He didn't say that part. Milo was still looking at him with the expression of someone following his thought process in real time. "You are good at your job," Kale said. It was the most words Kale had said to him at once. Not a lot of words. But delivered with the particular weight of someone who did not say things he didn't mean. Ren's throat did something complicated. "Thank you," he said. "The contract," Dante said from the window. He turned slightly. In profile, in this light, he was... Ren's brain supplied the word severe, and then immediately supplied no, that's not it, and then gave up and went with carved. Like something made rather than born. "It's your choice. You don't have to take it." "I know. You can ask questions." Ren looked at all 3 of them. He had approximately 40 questions. He chose the honest one. "Do you want me to take it?" Silence. "Yes," Dante said. At the desk, Kale set down the document he wasn't reading. Milo said nothing, but the way he was looking at Ren said something, and Ren's fluency in unspoken communication, honed by 3 years of trying not to get fired, translated it without permission. Obviously, it said, "We arranged this entire floor transfer for you. Keep up." Ren thought about the authorization with a single initial. Thought about a document placed on his desk without explanation. Thought about corridor appearances and corrected figures and a laugh that, he now understood from the way Kale had looked, was not a thing that happened often. "Okay," Ren said. Dante looked at him. "Okay. Yes. I'll take it." Ren stood because the sitting felt done. "Thank you. All of you." He paused. "Individually." Something happened to the room. He couldn't name it exactly. Just a small shift, like 3 people had exhaled at the same time, quietly, in a way they hadn't intended to show. Individually. One word. He hadn't meant anything by it. Just basic grammar. He found out later, from Juno, over terrible vending machine coffee on a night they were both working late, that the last person to thank all 3 of them as separate people had been their mother. She'd been dead for 11 years. Ren sat with that information for a long time. Then he went back to work. Chapter 7. The thing about working on the 42nd floor, Ren had learned, was that the walls were not as thick as they looked. This was not a metaphor. The conference rooms were soundproofed. The suite was soundproofed. But the corridor between the East Archive and the elevator bank had a particular acoustic quality, something about the angles, the hard floor, the way sound bounced, that meant conversations from the small meeting room at the end carried, faintly but clearly, to anyone standing at the archive shelves. Ren had known this for 2 weeks. He had, in the spirit of professionalism and self-preservation, been very careful not to stand at the archive shelves when the small meeting room was occupied. On a Thursday evening at 7:40, the floor was mostly empty, the triplets were in the suite, and Ren was at the archive shelves alone doing a filing backlog because he'd fallen behind on Tuesday and it bothered him. He was not being careless. He simply didn't know the small meeting room was occupied. He heard the voice first, not one he recognized, low and careful, the voice of someone who believed they were alone. Then a second voice. Then a name. The CEO Omega. Ren's hand stopped. Confirmed it's not a hire. Not operational. The triplets have been running interference for weeks. The quiet one's been repositioning his schedule around the kid's movements. Dante signed a level 7 access on week 1. Week 1, that doesn't happen. And Milo. I don't care about the details. What's the exposure? Significant. If someone wanted the triplets distracted, destabilized, or just needed them to make a mistake during a negotiation, the Omega is the lever. You pull the lever, they lose focus. Potentially lose control. Depending on how far the bond has progressed. Has it? Not yet. But it's forming. Our window is closing. If we move on the Omega before. Ren set down the file in his hands with great care. His heart was loud in his ears. He did not move. He stood very still, which was the thing his body did when his brain was processing faster than his feet could act on. The lever. He thought about the contract he'd signed 4 days ago. The clean white paper with his name on it and Dante's signature below it, efficient and exact. He thought about level 7 access. About the ways the floor had quietly, incrementally rearranged itself around him. He thought about a rival faction with a window that was closing. And he thought, I know what I do when things get bad. He'd done it twice before in this organization. Once when he'd accidentally filed a discrepancy report that implicated a manager 3 ranks above him. Once when he'd realized mid-presentation that he'd been given someone else's data and would have to say so in front of the room. His instinct was always the same. Run. Not permanently. Just exit the situation. Create distance. Get to somewhere small and manageable where the problem was only his and the fallout was contained to him alone. He picked up his bag. He walked to the elevator. He pressed B2. He made it to the parking level. He stood next to a concrete pillar in the fluorescent quiet and thought very clearly about the following. If he left, really left, transferred floors, took himself out of the equation, the lever ceased to exist. The rival faction lost their window. The triplets were no longer exposed through him. Clean, his brain said. Simple. It solves the problem. He was already composing the transfer request in his head. Then, the routing error is in column 12. He closed his eyes. How can you tell us apart? You hold your face differently. He thought about Kale in the archive corridor. Not doing anything. Just present. Like being near Ren was something he had chosen, without performance, without agenda. The way Kale chose most things, quietly and with complete intention. You look at people like you're hoping they'll do something that surprises you and you're not sure they will. Ren pressed the back of his head against the concrete pillar. He thought about Dante at the window, turning slightly to look at him. It's your choice. You don't have to take it. Like the choice actually mattered. Like Ren's answer would be honored regardless of what it was, because the other option, assuming the answer, had apparently not occurred to him. He thought about Milo laughing. 2 seconds. Unplanned. The way Juno had said quietly over vending machine coffee, I haven't heard that in a while, that sound. I wasn't sure I would again. He stood in the parking garage for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Then he went back up. Chapter 8. He knocked on the suite door at 8:14 p.m. He heard movement. Then Dante's voice, come in. All 3 of them were there. Late working, same as him, jackets off, the room in the quieter configuration of people who had stopped performing at each other and were just existing in the same space. Kale had a book. Milo was at his desk. Dante was by the window again always. They looked at him. He must have looked like something because the quality of attention in the room sharpened immediately. Not alarm, just focus, the specific recalibration of 3 people who were very good at reading situations. I need to tell you something, Ren said. Sit down, Dante said. I'd rather stand. He took a breath. I was at the archive shelves an hour ago. The small meeting room carries. I didn't know there was anyone in there until... He stopped. Reorganized. I heard a conversation. About me. About how I could be used to destabilize you. He looked at all 3 of them. Someone is planning to move on me before a bond forms, to use my removal, or my situation, to make you make mistakes. Silence. I know what their window is, Ren continued, because he was committed now and his mouth had never been better at running toward fire than away from it. It's closing based on what they said. Which means they'll move soon. I thought you should know. Before they do. He stopped. The 3 of them were very still. You went to the parking level, Kale said. Ren looked at him. How? Your access card, Kale said quietly. It logs. Of course it did. Level 7 access, and Kale paid attention to everything. Ren filed this away. Yes, Ren said. I thought about leaving. Why didn't you? Milo said. It came out quieter than his usual register. Not a challenge. An actual question. Ren looked at him. He thought about the version of this answer that was professional and measured and revealed nothing. He thought about his mouth and its history, and the 3 years he'd spent on floor 23 being the person who said the true thing at the wrong moment and paid for it. Then he thought, but that's also the reason I'm standing here. Because I didn't want to, Ren said. Running would have been cleaner. Easier. Taking me out of the equation. But he looked at the floor for a second, then back up. I didn't want to be the thing that got removed to solve the problem. I'd rather be the person who tells you about it. The room was very quiet. I know that's not, he started. Ren, Dante said. Dante had moved from the window. He was closer now, not crowding, not threatening, just no longer at a distance. This close, Ren could see the specific quality in his expression that he'd been trying to name for weeks and hadn't been able to. It wasn't severity. It was restraint. I should have told you what you were to me, Dante said. The sentence landed like a stone into still water. What Ren started. I should have told you, Dante said again quietly. Before you heard it from someone else's threat assessment. I was cautious. I didn't want to move too fast. I didn't want you to feel. He stopped. This was, Ren understood with a kind of stunned clarity, the most Dante had fumbled a sentence since Ren had met him. I was wrong to wait. I've been repositioning my schedule around your movements, Kale said from his chair. No preamble. Just the fact stated plainly the way Kale stated all true things. Since day 4. I told myself it was observation. It wasn't. He paused. I wanted to be near you. I don't do that. I haven't done that. Not once in 31 years for anyone. Ren's chest was doing something that made it hard to breathe at the correct intervals. Milo stood up from the desk. He crossed the room and stopped in front of Ren at a distance that was close enough to be deliberate and far enough to be a choice. Come closer if you want to, here is the space, here is the offer. I laughed, Milo said. 3 weeks ago. In this room. You said one sentence and I didn't plan it. I didn't know it was coming. Something moved in his expression, something rare and unguarded. I didn't realize until later that it had been 2 years. I'd been performing it for so long I stopped noticing the difference. He looked at Ren. You're the only person in this building who has ever said individually, Milo said. Who has acted like there were 3 separate people in the room instead of one thing with 3 faces. His voice dropped. Do you understand what that means? To us. Ren looked at all 3 of them. Dante, who wore restraint like armor and had just taken one piece off. Kale, who watched everything from a distance and had chosen over and over to close it. Milo, who smiled at rooms and had smiled at him, and those were not the same thing at all. Ren thought about the title that had arrived on his desk 3 weeks ago. Floor 42. Permanent. Effective immediately. The document routing. The access authorization. The way the floor had quietly rearranged itself. He thought, they've been telling me this entire time. I'm not good at being wanted, he said. It came out smaller than he intended. I've been demoted twice for saying the wrong thing. I've been invisible for 3 years on a floor 20 floors below this one, and I don't. He stopped. I don't know how to be something worth protecting. You came back up, Kale said. Ren looked at him. From the parking level, Kale said. You considered leaving. You came back. He held Ren's gaze. That's not someone who doesn't know his own worth. That's someone who's been told the wrong thing for too long. The silence after that was different from the silences before it. Softer. Like something had stopped bracing for impact. Ren breathed out. Okay, he said. Okay, Dante said. The rival faction, Ren said, because his brain was still running 2 tracks simultaneously and the second track had not stopped. What happens to them? Milo had been watching him with that particular attention that Ren now understood was not performance but preference. You, specifically, are interesting to me. That's handled, Milo said. By you. By us. The slight smile appeared. Not the public one. The real one, smaller, quieter, sharper at the edges. You don't have to watch. I wasn't planning to. Good. Milo tilted his head. Stay here instead. Chapter 9. The faction was handled in 11 days. Ren didn't watch. He knew it was happening in the way you knew weather was happening outside. Present, consequential, not something he needed to be in the middle of to understand. The floor operated with a different quality during those 11 days. Quieter in some ways, more tightly wound in others. People moved with more deliberate efficiency. Kim Juno's already minimal expression reduced to nearly nothing. Ren routed documents and corrected errors and showed up 9 minutes early and went home at reasonable hours and told himself he was fine. He was mostly fine. On day 7, Kale appeared at the archive shelves at 9 in the evening. The floor empty, Ren finishing a backlog, and sat on the edge of a desk nearby with a book and said nothing. Just stayed there for 40 minutes while Ren worked. On day 9, Dante sent him a document with a handwritten note at the top. Not a memo. Just, your instinct on the Q4 distribution was correct. I've implemented it. 4 words longer than he needed to write. Ren read it 3 times and then filed it in the back of his desk drawer, which was not a normal thing to do with internal notes, and he was aware of this. On day 10, Milo found him in the kitchen at midnight. Ren hadn't been able to sleep, had come back to the office, didn't have a better explanation, and said nothing for a while, just made 2 cups of coffee with the ease of someone who knew where everything was, and handed one to Ren and sat on the counter. Are you actually okay? Milo said. Ren considered the question. I keep thinking about what they said. On the recording. He looked at his coffee. The lever. Like I was, he stopped. A tool? Milo said. Yes. You're not. I know. You did know. Mostly. It's just that I've spent 3 years being invisible and then suddenly I'm relevant enough to be a tactical target and it's... He looked for the word. Disorienting, Milo said. I was going to say a lot. Milo smiled, the real one, the quiet one. That too. Can I ask you something? Yes. Ren looked at him. You said you'd been performing the laugh for so long you stopped noticing. What is that? He stopped. Tried again. What does that mean? For you. Milo was quiet for a moment. In the kitchen's fluorescent quiet, without the suit jacket, with his coffee and his unperformed expression, he looked, not smaller, just actual. Like a version of himself that existed before the version everyone else saw. We grew up being one thing, Milo said. Not 3 things. 1. Dante decided, Kale observed, Milo managed the room, and together that was the CO Triplets, which was a unit, a brand, a tool. He said the last word evenly. I became very good at being the approachable face. The one people didn't fear. The one who smiled and made things easier. He looked at Ren. At some point the performance became the function. I did it so well I forgot I was doing it. Pause. Until I didn't. Until you laughed, Ren said. Until you made me laugh, Milo said. Without trying. Without knowing who I was. He held Ren's gaze. You asked me once, not out loud but your face asked, which one are you? And then you figured it out on your own. And you looked at me like I was a person you were pleased to identify. He set down his coffee. Nobody looks at me like that. They look at Milo CO. They don't look at me. Ren thought about this for a while. For what it's worth, he said eventually, you're the most alarming one. Instinctively. The smile puts me on alert every time. Milo looked delighted. Good instincts. I'm aware. They also make me say things at terrible moments. I know. The delight didn't fade. I love that about you. The word love landed lightly, casually, the way Milo deployed most important things, as though lightness made them easier to receive. But it landed and Ren felt it and Milo watched him feel it and didn't look away. The faction is done tomorrow, Milo said. How do you know? Because I know. He said it simply. And after that, he tilted his head. We'd like to take you to dinner. All 3 of us. Not a meeting. Not the suite. Pause. We've never done that. With anyone. Taken someone to dinner? Wanted to, Milo said. Ren looked at him. Then at his coffee. Then at the ceiling, which was unhelpful. Okay, he said. Okay, Milo said, and the smile he was wearing now was nothing like the one he gave rooms. Chapter 10. The restaurant was closed to other guests. Ren noticed this when they arrived and the floor was empty and the staff moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had been briefed. He said, you didn't have to close it, and Dante said, we wanted to, and that was the end of that. They sat at a table by the window, city below, same as the suite but warmer here, the light amber and low. Dante across from him. Kale to his left. Milo to his right. Nobody performed anything. That was the thing Ren noticed first and couldn't stop noticing. The absolute absence of performance. No carefully managed expressions. No strategic silence. Kale spoke more than Ren had ever heard him speak. Not a lot, never that, but present, contributing, asking a question about something Ren had mentioned once in passing weeks ago and had not expected to be remembered. Dante without the window and the boardroom and the weight of being the voice, was funny, Ren thought, startled. Not broadly. Not performing it. Just occasionally, quietly, precise in the way all his speech was precise but pointed toward something human instead of something functional. He said something dry about the wine and Milo laughed and Ren looked at Dante's face in the moment after. The small, satisfied expression of someone who had made the specific person laugh that he wanted to make laugh, and filed it away. Milo across the dinner table with no agenda was warm. Genuinely, unhurriedly warm. He asked questions and listened to the answers and didn't redirect, didn't manage the conversation, just let it go where it went. They talked for 3 hours. Ren said the wrong thing twice, both times recovered, both times absorbed without consequence, and once Kale had said, in his flat unhurried way, "No, you were right the first time," and Ren had laughed, surprised, and Kale had looked at him with that hoping expression, hoping you'll surprise me, and said nothing but looked pleased. On the walk back, late, the city quieter, Dante fell into step beside him and said, "You came back up." Ren glanced at him. "From the parking level," Dante said. "I know Kale told you the card logs. But I want to say I'm glad that you came back. You would have let me leave." "Yes. Even though. Especially because," Dante said. "If you'd decided to leave, that would have been your answer." "I don't," he stopped. "I've spent my entire life making decisions that other people had to accept. I didn't want to be that for you." They walked for a moment. "You're the first person," Ren said carefully, "who has ever asked me if I want something. Not what I'll do. Not what I should do." He looked ahead at the street. "You just assume the answer matters." "It does." "I know." He looked at Dante. "That's the part that's new." Epilogue. 6 months later, the suite was quiet in the way of late evenings, the floor empty, the city dark beyond the window, the low light doing what low light did to rooms when people had stopped being careful about being seen. Ren was on the couch. He had, in his defense, intended to finish the filing review. The review was still on his lap. He had made significant progress before the warmth of the room and the 37-hour week had combined forces and made a compelling argument. He was asleep before he knew he was asleep. He did not experience the moment when the filing review was carefully lifted from his lap. He did not experience Kale sitting at the end of the couch with the book he'd been carrying for 6 months and finally, in the quiet, reading it. He did not experience Milo glancing over from his desk twice, then pulling his chair around to face the room in the way of someone who has decided that the most interesting thing is happening over there. Dante stood at the window. He did not look at the city. He looked at the room, at Kale reading with the unguarded focus he only showed when he believed no one was watching, at Milo watching Ren sleep with the expression he'd stopped trying to hide around the 4th week, at Ren on the couch entirely unconscious and entirely trusting, his face in sleep stripped of the careful watchfulness that normally lived there. Dante thought about a boardroom. For months ago. A person sitting down on the nearest available surface because his legs had given out. "Your lap is very comfortable." Delivered with the helpless honesty of someone whose mouth had long since stopped waiting for permission. He'd sat in that chair with a sleeping stranger and felt, for the first time in longer than he could calculate, something that was not the operational numbness of being what was needed. He'd felt selected. Not as a boss. Not as the CO triplets. Not as the eldest or the voice or the leader or any of the architecture they'd built. Just chosen. By someone who fell asleep and then woke up and then told the truth with the same helpless velocity he did everything. "I fell asleep in under a minute and I'm choosing not to examine what that means." Ren made a small sound and turned slightly, and Kale reached over without looking up and adjusted the blanket that had appeared from somewhere, efficiently, like this was already a practiced thing. Milo looked at Dante. Dante looked at Milo. Something passed between them that didn't need words, had never needed words, had been their primary language since before they could speak at all. This one had said. "I know," said the other. "Did you think?" "Yes. Since the first day." He said individually. I know. He came back up. I know. Milo smiled. Not at the room. At his brothers, at Dante and Kale and Milo, 3 separate people who had been one word for 31 years and had not, until 4 months ago, known what they were missing. Dante turned back to the window. Below, the city moved in its indifferent patterns. He did not feel indifferent. He felt, with the same precision he felt everything quietly, completely, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had finally located the thing he had stopped believing he was allowed to want. Present. All 3 of them. For the first time. Separately. Together. Thank you for listening. Do not forget to check out other stories on the channel and subscribe to the BL Story Room for more stories in the future.